Morning, everybody. I'm still Trent, in case you forgot. So, to no surprise, we're still going over Jonah. We're in Jonah chapter 3, right? Conveniently, 4 chapters in Jonah. Number 3, third Sunday in February. So if we can just go through a couple introduction slides. The same couple slides every time. What are we doing here? Trying to learn how to love. Using Jonah as an example of what not to do as we learn how to love each other. Go ahead, next slide. Love take action. Takeaway. This is my professorship coming out. If you don't remember anything else, remember that. Love takes action, which is why it's the first thing every week. So we have our 4 areas, right? Each of the 4 chapters in Jonah. And today we're going to go over the call, number 3. And the interesting thing about chapter 3 in Jonah is that it's the only chapter that really deals with Nineveh, right? All the other chapters deal with Jonah. Chapter 1 is Jonah running away. Chapter 2 is Jonah praying to God, restoring that connection. And then number 3 is the actual call, the actual reason why he was called to begin with. And so it's funny, if Jonah had listened to God, we'd have chapter 3, and that'd be pretty much it, right? It'd be God called Jonah, Jonah went to Nineveh, the end, right? But that's not what happened, right? And that's kind of the story that we're a little sidetracked here from the story of Jonah, because Jonah has a little part in the beginning of this chapter, and then we go to Nineveh. Nineveh is the main point of chapter 3. So Jonah's still around, but this chapter is really about Nineveh and the people of Nineveh and what they decide to do with God's call. So we read Jonah chapter 3 earlier. And once again, I'm just going to explore certain aspects of the chapter as we go through. So if you would go to the next slide, please. So this is Jonah's small part in chapter 3, right? He gets the introduction where God calls him again, and he actually follows and agrees this time. And he goes to Nineveh. And it says, Nineveh, how does it say it? I have ESV, so it might be worded a little bit different. But it says, the Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey. And if you go around this city, it doesn't actually take 3 days to go all the way around the circumference of the city. So what it probably means is that to get to every part of the city takes 3 days, right? If you wanted to explore all of Nineveh, it would take 3 days. So the suggestion here is that Jonah actually took 3 days to go to every part of the city. So he actually went around the city and told people this, that you have 40 days or you'll be overthrown. So he probably went through every part of the city, trying to be very holistic, very fulfilled in his calling, maybe not in his heart, but at least in his checklist, right? God said, go talk to people in Nineveh. I'm going to go make sure I talk to every single one. So God can't get mad at me again. And then he can destroy the city, right? That's chapter 4. We'll get to that later. In this part, he really just wants to say, I did my job. I go through the checklist. I told them all what they were supposed to do. And so that's kind of the ultimatum here. You have 40 days to get right, or it's over for you. And the ultimatum here isn't a punitive ultimatum, right? It's not like I'm angry at you, and so I'm just going to warn you, I'm going to punish you. It's more like a well-intentioned teacher or well-intentioned parent. If you don't turn your life around, bad things are going to happen. If you don't study for this test, you're not going to pass. If you don't start making good decisions, you're going to have to deal with the ramifications of those decisions. So this ultimatum is not a punitive ultimatum. It is a loving ultimatum. Listen, if you don't do this, bad things are going to happen. So if you go to the next slide. I used to think words about us described who we are, but now I know they shape who we are. What does that mean? That's kind of like when you're parenting, right? And you say, you are smart versus you put in a lot of effort. And there are studies that suggest that if you tell kids they're smart, they're more likely to cheat because they think that's a state. And they need to constantly prove that they are smart. But if you tell kids, you worked really hard for that, then what they focus on is the effort. And so what you say about people influences what they think about themselves. So in the same way, if God had commanded Jonah to say, "You're all doomed," oh, okay, we're doomed. Versus, "You have 40 days. Okay, we have 40 days. And so the ultimatum here is really, it's a nuance, right? But it's important. That's the difference between you are smart, so you have to cheat to keep that up, versus you're smart because you put in the effort, because you did the work, because we believe in you and you have the capacity to do that. So it's a small difference, but it's a difference. To say you are doomed people, which is what Jonah I would have preferred to say. You're doomed people. Good luck out there. Versus, there's still hope for you. You got 40 days. So how we think about people, how we think about them as static, this is who you are, versus growing, this is who you could be, makes a huge difference in how we talk to them, and the words we use, and the way we approach people. Next slide, please. All right, so then we go to chapter 3, verse 6. And this part, the king, everyone else in the city is putting on sackcloth and fasting and trying to turn the wrath of God away from them. And in this verse, the king does the same thing. And that's not what kings are supposed to do usually, right? When we think about kings, we think about people that are in high pieces of authority, they're kind of above the population. And so when we get to this part, the king is doing something that kings aren't supposed to do, right? But he does it anyway, because he cares about his people. And ironically, this is like the second or third time in the book where someone else besides Jonah actually cares about people, right? So Jonah up to this point was really caring about himself, and then we have another non-Jewish, non-God follower caring about people. And so he changes the rules of what it means to be a king so that he can care about his people. So if you go to the next slide. I used to think rules were made by someone else, but now I know we have to make some of our own. And so there's a logical fallacy. I don't know if you've ever heard of the no true Scotsman logical fallacy. Basically it goes like this: no true Scotsman would do whatever, right? And that just doesn't work, because there's all kinds of Scotsmen, right, out there. And there's all kinds of people out there. There's all kinds of ways of doing things. And so, when we look at what is expected of us, what the rules are, there's some flexibility there. And again, I'm going to use my parenting example. 2 things you can do to get unsolicited advice all the time is become a parent or start a business. And everyone will give you advice on what you should be doing, right? And while they might be well-intentioned, they don't know your kids. They don't know your business. And so they might not be right. And so to come out and say, this is what you need to do, this is what you have to do, you take it with a grain of salt. Because my kids are not your kids, which are not standardized kids. They're not aggregate kids. My boy, if you saw him here last week, he is a hyperactive kid. He's a social, hyperactive kid who has the hardest time focusing. The tall one, yeah. You got one of those too? Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. I was the same way, right? So I have hyperactivity, which is why I'm constantly distracted. But he inherited that, unfortunately. And so taking parent advice from people that have more stoic, more calm, more reserved children is horrible. It does not work for anyone, right? And so while well-intentioned, doesn't work. So there might be rules about parenting. This is what you ought to do. That doesn't mean it's going to work in your context. Or your family, right? This is how you're supposed to talk to family. This is how you're supposed to deal with conflict. It really is contextual. And in the same way, in a good way, we can change the rules a little bit for our context. In the same way, we can change the rules poorly in our context. So there's a story about, I don't know if you've heard that before, but with the lighthouse, There's a story about people started a lighthouse to start saving people that got shipwrecked. And then after a while, they really liked just hanging out at the lighthouse. They liked getting furniture and getting book clubs and sitting around talking about how great lighthouses were. And eventually no one actually saved anyone. And so that changed, the rule of the lighthouse changed, but for the worse. And so we have to be careful when we change the rules. But if we do it wisely and correctly and for the benefit of others, that makes parenting better. That makes dealing with relationships better, because we aren't dealing with hard and fast rules of how people are supposed to behave. We're dealing with, what do they need from me at this time? What does my poor hyperactive boy need from me to do well in school? Which is different than my very reserved mama number 2 daughter, right? Mia, my second oldest, she's like mom number 2, right? Very sweet, very caring, very, Tristan, Addie, why are you not doing these things? That's what mom told us to do. And so those are different personalities, and I cannot treat them the same and expect them both to excel. So while we have these standards, while we have these rules, these accepted practices, people are different. And so we need to understand that when we approach different contexts, we might need to make some new rules. So that's what the king did in this situation. Next slide, please. Last resort. So even after they did all these things for 40 days, right, or for days and days, they don't really know what's going to happen. And so this is their Hail Mary, right? This is their last resort. This is the culminating final shot in all of your favorite Disney sport movies, right? Somehow it still came down to 1 second, down 1 point. Like, it's a miracle how it always happens at the end of these movies. One score away. Or if you're a Hallmark fan, right? It's that last, I'm going to run through the airport to tell her I love her before she gets on that final plane. It's that last, I have to. Is that how you met? Is that what oh, okay. Just. Yeah. But it's that feeling, right? We got one shot left at this, so we're going to lay it all on the table and see if we can get through it. So whether it's the sport analogy or the Hallmark analogy or the, I don't know, what other analogies you want to use there. Pick your favorite, right? We put it all on the line, and this is our last shot. So that's really the feeling that we have going here, is that we're not really sure. Like, we're new to this whole God thing, right? Like, we didn't even know this was happening until Jonah came and told us a couple days ago. And so we have no idea if we're doing this right. But we're going to put it all out there and see what we can get done. See if we can save our city. And the leaders of this city were really concerned for their people. Again, what Jonah wasn't, right? He wasn't really concerned for the other people. He's really just going through his checklist. God told me to tell them that they're doomed, so I'm going to come tell them they're doomed. Great. So that's a kind of a contrast there as well from the punitive nature of Jonah, right? You're all doomed. See ya. Versus the redemptive work of God, which is you are doomed unless you do this. Because I'm still on your side. Next slide. So the very last verse of chapter 3. I'm sorry, I didn't talk about Bob Goff first. So for Bob Goff, I talked about, I used to think God opened and closed doors for us. And now I realize that some doors need to be kicked down. And I remember I was watching I forget what movie it was. I'm going to be honest. It was some romantic movie my wife was watching, and I don't remember what it was. But the guy in the movie said, he was about to let his love go, and he said, I just want you to be happy. Yeah, exactly. That's what my wife said. And she's like, she's happy with you, you idiot. So fight for her, right? That's what she was yelling at the TV. It was very humorous. I don't know what was going on, but she was very upset about that. So that's what we're really thinking about here, is don't wait. We don't always want to kick down doors, right? Kicking down doors is a bad way to lose a lot of money replacing doors, right? So we don't want to make a habit out of that. But there are some doors that probably need to be kicked down. There are some things worth fighting for. You don't want your firefighters coming to your house and being like, knock, knock, I'm sorry, your door's locked. Can someone unlock that before we come and rescue you? I'm sorry, I don't want to kick this door down. That would be rude. No, we want them to kick the door down and rescue people inside, right? So there are some situations that doors just need to be kicked down. The things need to be fought for. Next slide. This is the last verse in Jonah. And it talks about when God saw that Nineveh had made restitution, when they did turn from their ways, he did not have a disaster befall them, just like he promised he would do. So there's two interesting things out of this verse, especially. God keeps his promises, right? But also that they were welcome. The ultimatum wasn't I just need to go through this checklist to make sure I feel good because I'm God, so I need to make, say you have another chance and destroy you anyway. No, it really is you were always welcome here. All you had to do was turn and pay attention. So if we go to the next slide, Bob Goff, I used to think I needed an invitation to get into most places, but now I know I am already invited. I'm going to share a story of a pastor I used to have shared with me once. His son was really into motorcycles and had the whole ensemble, beard longer than mine, hair more extreme than mine, leather, tattoos. That was his son, and his son really into the motorcycle culture, the Harley Davidson culture. And he was not, right? Shorter guy, played cello, kind of the opposite kind of personalities there. But his son invited him once to a motorcycle rally. And so what he did is he went and got his old brown leather coat. He tried to fit in as much clothes-wise as he could. He still felt a little nervous because he didn't know this culture. He didn't know how, he just knew his son was really into it. But he didn't know much about it. So he was really apprehensive. But he gets to the event and he walks in and he looks around. He's really awkward. Everyone's looking at him like, I don't know why he's doing here. But then he sees his son, and his son's eyes light up, and he quickly walks over to his dad and he gives him a hug. And he says, I was always invited. Even if I didn't feel like it, because I have that connection with that person, I was always welcome here. And that's the important part, especially of the culminating theme of chapter 3 is that you're always welcome. Even if you think you're not, even if you've done things that maybe close the door on you for a little bit, you're always welcome. So as we think about Jonah, Jonah played a small part, right, in the redemptive work of Nineveh. He spent a couple days telling them what God told him to tell them. But most of their restorative work was them, right? Nineveh realized the error of their ways and turned. And we'll see next week, Jonah's still sulking, right, over on the corner about it. But Nineveh saw an opportunity here, just like the people on the boat from chapter 1. They saw an opportunity to turn, and they did. So if nothing else, we can remember this, the restitution. There's always an opportunity for restitution because you're always welcome. I'm going to say a quick prayer for us as our worship team comes back up. And I just want you to think about not just what your Jonah moment might be, what thing that you're either called to, maybe running from, but also what you could be turning in your own life. What places you're already welcome to that you're avoiding. Or maybe you're living in that, and you can help other people get there too. Dear Jesus, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the opportunity to always come back to you. Help us to be never too afraid to do what we need to do to live in your calling for our life. Amen.